Matt, since you are supporting us today and replacing Steve in his absence, and you will be continuing the document from where we left off on our last meeting, please go ahead and start, and let's continue with the review.
Thanks, Mina. So as Mina said, I'm going to be a poor substitute for Steve, but bear with me, and I appreciate all the help along the way. I'm glad Jan's here because he can fill in the many blanks I might have in my head about some of the history around a lot of these fields. But in terms of vulnerability ratings, where we left off or we'll start, so a lot of these things should be obvious to us where they come from and why they're represented in Cyclone. So again, ratings is a array of a ratings object, if you will, with these fields which follow. The first of them being source of the vulnerability, source that calculated the severity of risk. So can come from, a vulnerability can come from many sources and have many different scores. So we just try to identify them with the URL and the name. Stop me at any point if there are questions or commentary, please. So again, URL and name are shown here. No surprise to anyone. In terms of the optional score, we have the numerical score, integer. We have the severity, which is one of these enumerated values from critical to unknown to support the life cycle of evaluation. The method for evaluation, the scoring system, the rating system. And then it has the CVSS version and methodologies and scoring systems that you can declare. New ones coming along can use other. We have the vector, which is the which should be familiar in terms of CVS vectors.
Sorry, Matt. Can
yes.
I go back?
Yes. How far?
Is it? Oh, that page. Having this very strict encoding means that we have to upgrade every time there's a new one, like a 3 and 3.1. Would it be beneficial if we just had CVSS as one and version as another field that is not enumerated in order to not be so strict and having to update with all the others?
I think, again, record these suggestions and think so that Jan typically helps us turn these into issues for future releases. Off the top of my head, I think that these values may come from a well, I don't know, it may make sense, but I think that, like I said, not everything has a version necessarily, like OWASP,
no.
CVC. Yeah, so I mean,
I just got worried with all the various CVSS scores.
Yeah, and
we have to maintain that, but we can take that issue back to the community and see what we can do.
that question or flavor, that question is valid for any time we have an enumeration. And Jan knows that we've talked about trying to get rid of enums in favor of other methodologies in the future. But those are type 2.0 conversations, to locally fix this, things that it may be a possibility. I know that in terms of dependency track, when we raise things in dependency track vulnerability based upon these values, these sources, they factor into an equation. So deterministic mapping to a label has been fairly convenient, and it's all about visualization of these things and being able to raise them up in the system based upon credibility and version and whatnot, and score and criticality and things like that. So separating these stuff might have an interesting effect if you're trying to compose an equation based upon this.
Yeah.
Anyway,
can you just scroll up so I get the section name? Is it method? Okay.
Well, this is all under
Thank you.
Score, I believe. Score's a number severity thing. Yeah, I'm not used to looking at this spec. I have my reference up, which is the online guide that we produce on the web. Let's see. So moving on, thanks for consideration, and hopefully that appeared in the notes. Talk about
Sorry,
vector.
question. If you're not used to looking at this spec and the online guide is sort of a more clear representation, I'm wondering, is there anything from the online guide that we should pull into this to make sure that it's a usable reference material?
It's just scrolling through a long document is not fun compared to having a nice collapsible guide where I can do this. And I can see them indented in context, so I know where they live in the data schema, basically. So it's just I mean I have this up nonstop, often more than one version. Anyway, but this is just another view
Oh,
on
I
it.
see.
This is fine for canonical. I mean, I assume that we adapted, most canonical standards, I believe, use some type of, you know, document format. They don't use an online format. It's canonical. Yeah.
Yeah, we need to produce a PDF for Ecma. Now, some standards bodies do allow the online version to be canonical, but that's not. If we find ourselves with a need for that, then let's talk about it. But sounds like you're okay with this.
Yeah, I'll muddle through. CWEs, again, this is an array, so they can multiples can appear as needed. Scrolling down, and actually each item of the array can have a description and as well as details, recommendations, workarounds. So to your heart's content, you can describe everything around any entry. So proof of concept. Now, I'm not as familiar with this section, so more help would be appreciated. It's evidence used to reproduce the vulnerability and steps to reproduce. So of course, these things are important to represent for any company trying to assess if they're affected or not. So these fields appear to their benefit. What's the environment, supporting materials. My side commentary would be, in a future version, major version of the spec, like 2.0, that some of these things could be represented in formulation or formulas as well. So that's my hope. And then, of course, we have the ubiquitous attachments. So you can attach supporting material in the form of attachments. And you can describe, of course, the attachment in terms of its content type and encoding. Base64 being the really only option, which is fine enough for everybody, I think. Attachment text. Now we're moving on to advisories.
So sorry, Matt. Can you scroll up to content type? What I missed that.
Yeah, so this is attachment again. Attachment is one of the mechanisms we have repeatedly to attach.
But should we refer to the IANA listed content types here? Or do we allow people to invent whatever they want? I mean, content type is something defined by IANA for various protocols.
Yeah, and if you're there, I think that new content types, I think X- content types can be also added.
That's a registered exception, that if you create your own stuff, you add X. But we're in the IETF, we're trying to leave the X behind, but that's how it is. But you can't just invent something like application Microsoft Inc. Word. You have to use one of the agreed for interoperability, right?
Right.
So we'll take that in the notes and bring it back.
Yeah, I think this goes back to enumerations, and maybe there was a use case where content types were opaque and didn't map to some IANA type. So this may be, forgivable in term, most things we defer to string. Again, the problem, and then we get to, if we mirror ourselves to.
Like in the CWE, you have a reference to the CVE website. We could have a reference here to the ANA website saying, for interoperability, prefer
think
those.
Yeah, I think that
even though it's a string.
Yeah, I think that I'm afraid to scroll around here. I could bring up the data schema in some format. There might be some examples or recommendations there. This kind of was asking Jan if there is some type of example or recommendations that are actually in the data schema. I believe
We'll bring that back.
Okay.
So what's the action item here?
Actually, item is, so basically this would affect anywhere where attachment exists, and we've already hit attachment many times through the course of these reviews, that it might help for the content type to refer to or reference IANA types in some way.
And
I also wonder if we
actually
should
calls it media types, but
And yes, Steve has also called it media types as well. So
I wonder if we should be deduplicating these little subschemas like attachment type. I know that they were duplicated on purpose because Steve thought that it was better for the flow or something. But
yeah, you mentioned that a week or two previous, Daniel, I recall as well. Yeah.
oh, sorry. But in particular about the normative references, that's what it's usually called in a specification to when it's referring to something that's defined in another specification. That's something that generally it's good to have pretty precisely. And often we have like a section at the end, which is, like a bibliographic kind of reference. And here it can, refer to that.
Yeah, I think that having heard what you said, the way I would design a spec, it would be like you described, it'd be referential, but I would use hyperlinks. And so I'm not familiar with the requirements Steve was put under to produce the canonical documents for Ecma.
So you can have hyperlinks in a PDF, but generally what you do in a specification is you refer to another numbered section with one of those fancy
reference
S's.
lists.
Yeah. So I think we could do that here.
Yeah, I've done those similar.
And there was definitely no requirement from Ecma to not factor it that way. I think he was just trying to figure out what would be the most readable.
Yeah, I think that what you described is exactly what my brain resolved to. Instead of jumping around with links and trying to jump back and forth, the question is, now we've hit the other side of the equation, which is now, we've hit attachment multiple times. Now we're questioning one of the fields of attachment that we should give better advice. So maybe that has value as well in retrospect. So maybe hitting it in one particular context or another is valuable. Maybe if Ali wasn't here today and somebody else was, and they saw it for the first time, and it occurred to them, and they saw it in a different light or a different context. I think it's working out, and now we've made it through based upon the scroll bar of the entire document. So I'm for plowing ahead. And I'm okay at stopping or going quickly, knowing that I've been here for many reviews, but stopping if some new person or somebody has a new thought, not a problem.
Yeah, it's definitely been useful for us to go over this multiple times. I think for often multiple passes of reviews are useful, though then we can decide separately whether we want that to actually be reflected multiple times in the spec.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people like I do think about something and it goes off on a side thread. And then then it comes back with some computation days or weeks later. so anyway.
The important thing here is we're referencing an IETF standard, and I think we should have clear reference to it. So.
No, I don't dispute that. I think that in the way I wouldn't change the schema would be my recommendation, but maybe in terms of
add a reference.
Add a reference, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So then we have the advisories is the next section. So published advisories of vulnerability if provided. And then that's composed of this object title and URL. Again, strings. And down to things that help us better assess where these advisories and these vulnerabilities are created is that we have timestamps basically created, published, updated, rejected, etc. We have credits. If people want to take credit for the discovery, many people do. People have made companies and careers off of finding vulnerabilities.
Sorry, Matt, can you scroll up to the RFC reference, RFC 3339? Thank you. Just double checking.
So is that a sideways of, saying that that's what we could do for the attachment content type?
Yeah. But I just want to check whether there's some replacement of that RFC or not. I mean, RFCs are.
Thank you.
Yeah. But that's okay.
So credits consist of, again, our familiar, organizations, which is an array, as well as individuals with maps to, repeated types also in the spec of organizational entity, which we've seen already, which includes a bomb ref, so we can declare them once and reference them many times if we need to. The name, their address, which is a new location. Thanks to Jan kindly adding this to the last version of the spec. And then we have the contact, optional contact at the organization. And we go into each of these fields individually. Address itself is composed of the schema.org postal address, which I added for another context, but hopefully it will now make an appearance other places. And I think that actually, given the nearness of Ali's comments, that maybe we need a reference here as well to the schema.org postal address. So somebody would kindly record that in the notes as well. Anyways, actually, that's, I'm all for that. And, because standards should be based upon other standards and reference them.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So that gives them more credibility. Anyways. So it goes to country, region, all these things are fairly straightforward. Locality, there's examples also in the schema. The examples are, I'll point out for fun, that the example is based, you can tell I added it because the example is is Texas and Austin. And this is 901 is the building where my office exists that I only go to like a few times a year. And that's the address of my office or postal or zip code. Main Street is not where it's located. I did disambiguate that, but yeah. Then organization URLs.
Oh, we have fixed that. Example.com. Great.
What was the problem with that? I'm sorry.
No, earlier there was Ecma, and I opened a ticket on that because Ecma could be registered. There are a few IP addresses and domain names that are open for documentation purposes. Example.com is one of them, and you have to use them, especially when writing standards.
I appreciate the information. Thank you. I'll have to go back through all my test cases of my utility and remove Ecma.
Yeah.
So in organizational contact, again, is a repeated structure. Bomb ref again for the same reason, for referential purposes. Name, email, and phone number. Those have been around in Cyclone for forever. Bomb ref is kind of new. I'm scrolling fast. Again, as always, does set precedent. Please stop me and we can go back. Then this goes back to organizational contact. Organizational contact. So this goes back to the same thing. Bomb ref, so I can reference it again once, so not to repeat it. Name of the contact, email, and phone. Again, the fields are straightforward. Strings. Examples are there as well. Example.com, again, repeated. We have a 1-800 number. 555, I think, is the safe way to go. That's used for examples legally.
Fun enough, there are phone numbers set aside for instance, movies and examples.
Interesting.
Mhm.
And then the tools. So the tools used to identify, confirm. I think this goes back to, you know, reproducibility and being able to make sure that, you know, you can confirm what was reported. What's interesting there, this hit me hard in the schema. So I'll just point out that there's two tools objects, a legacy one and a new one. So
With the same name.
We don't have names in the data models. We just have data
Okay.
models.
Sorry.
So that's for people like me who go into tooling and I'm writing bindings and things like that. I got to be aware of those things. So anyways, so tools, this is the new version of it. It has an array of components and services, which is actually nice and clean, and actually the way I would have done it as well. So I like the new structure, personal commentary, the legacy structure. Wait, is this correct?
.2 was legacy as above.
Um,
I'm looking, so 1.1 is tools, normal. And I see legacy, I see components here. Components and services here. So are both field, I got it. Both fields somehow appear. Oh, this is just a way that the document was generated linearly. So because there's two types, they're both under the tools section. So they're kind of mashed together a little bit, it looks like. I don't know if there's a better way to generate or change it around, but I would make that comment. Or maybe I wouldn't say anything if I wasn't hosting today or facilitating today. So there's the components and services for the new structure and comprised of component and service. Got it. Again,
Wait, sorry to back up, but if this is confusing, the tools legacy and the tools, should we circle back on that?
yeah,
After, like, should I put it in the notes?
Yeah, I'm hoping I've said that somebody's putting in the notes that we need to look at from a document generation point of view, structure point of view, that I see tools legacy here. And then I immediately see the descriptions of the components for the tools, the new tools. So that's confusing to me. Jan, are you seeing?
Okay, now I get it. So the description for the tools 1.1 follows 1.2.
Yeah, they're kind of mashed together, and in the way this was generated linearly, you know, with a full expansion, like we've been talking about, you know, caused my confusion, and I think that Ollie just saw the same thing I saw. So
And so we put in the notes for us to review that,
yeah,
or maybe fix it.
yeah, probably fix it. Thank you. So again, here's the legacy structure. Yeah, that needs to be fixed. It should be, this tool's legacy should not be legacy here, I don't think. I think that's my interpretation. It should be the new tool structure because it shows the new tool components.
it's pretty confusing. I'm writing that down as a task to have it fixed.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Here-
I mean, you could just explain how the new structures looks like, and
Yeah.
hopefully you'll find the others.
I think this is a totally mislabel here, though, to be honest with you. And because it's repeated here. And that's just, and then what follows it is actually the legacy ones. Because the legacy fields are these fields, which is vendor, name, version, hashes, external references. That's the legacy structure.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. God, why did I get this section to facilitate on? Anyways, so again, the fields are straightforward in terms of, you know, strings, the vendor name, version. Again, if you want to give hashes for the tools if applicable, that's here. And of course, external references to the tools, you can point to them to your heart's content. And it outlines these fields with examples. And we've seen hashes repeated before. Algorithm and content, SHAs and things. Yeah, I think that if not, basically to continue the commentary from Ala, maybe if there's an enumeration, if we can if there's a reference to a standard where we get this enumeration from, I don't know if we should add that as well. I worry about that. So I'll say something that makes me say no. But maybe we reference things for established FIPS algorithms potentially. The problem is with quantum safe computing crypto, that becomes more difficult because those methods are evolving and a lot of them are experimental. So there is not a clear.
While I like standing on the shoulders of others, I think this is an interoperability point for CycloneDX where we probably need our own change control. So I think managing the list ourselves could be good, but at some point we may want to add for each of these add a reference to the respective RFC.
Yeah, I think multiple references, saying that this is not the reference, it is a reference that can be used is helpful to back up where these values come from.
And MD5 should be killed according to many RFCs. So we should probably try to deprecate that at some point.
I wouldn't do that. I need to document that I have a deprecated version running somewhere. And if we deprecate it in our document standard, I couldn't actually document it. So.
Historical, yeah.
Oh, that's for the CBOM. Yeah, you're right. Okay.
Yeah. That's one use case. Yes. Yes.
Yep.
Again,
definitely we need to capture if someone use MD5 or RC4. So
adding new references appropriately should not be a great hardship. It only improves the spec value, but doesn't change it, structurally or, otherwise.
So I have a quick question because I see this pattern repeated, or maybe it's not a quick question. I have a question. So the numbering here, for example, you've got 14296 external references, which is type array. And then the next point is 14297, where each item of the array must be, et cetera, et cetera. I would expect that to be hierarchical, where you would have 14296.1 or something instead of 14297. Is this like a conscious decision to not do that?
I don't know. My guess is, based upon our previous discussions today, is that it's an artifact of whatever was used to generate this document and the imperfect tooling and its configuration that resulted in these numbering schemes.
Okay, then we'll add that to the notes and see why that, because I agree that is a very confusing point.
It's a good catch and it bothers me as well. I just don't know if there's what tool Steve used and if there's a better tool or a better way to.
I think he wrote it himself, to be honest. So
I know that I've done a lot of document conversions like this in the past for standards. And I know that a lot of tools die after certain levels of indentation, if you will, or subsections. And a lot of them limit to 3, unfortunately. So that he might have encountered that with whatever tool he ended up leveraging. So.
Well, there's examples. There's definitely examples of there having been another, fourth component. I don't know if that's manual or what's.
I think
tooling or not, but
my quick analysis, which without much confirmation and not wanting to scroll around a lot, is that the tool is basing it upon depth in the schema tree. So
yeah,
anyway.
we capture it in the notes so we can go back and see if it's a tooling error or something else.
I'm certain that Steve will take these to heart and endeavor to fix these things. I don't know what impact these things will have on.
I think we just killed this weekend. So.
Yeah, I'm thinking in terms of I know that the question is, maybe Samina or Daniel can answer, or Samina left. If we regenerate the document with new numbering schemes, for example, do we have to start the review from the beginning?
So this is Samina. I have already provided some time ago to Steve the template. I believe he's converted it to the Ecma template, and I know that he had to do some adjustments. Let's talk to Steve. I will have a separate call with him just to ensure that the format is the one based on the template that was provided. And if there is a numbering scheme issue, then we need to discuss it.
So another aspect to the question was whether we have to restart the review because the format or the numbering scheme changes, and I think the answer is no.
Correct.
We're reviewing the contents. We should work to get these things right in the there's no kind of formal requirement that a review happen in a particular way. So as long as we're doing the actual semantic review and then we work on the editorial stuff in a way, then we're good.
Thank you, Daniel. Okay, how are we doing on time?
You're good. We've got 22 minutes left.
Thank you. All right.
A few hundred pages.
Can we speed go through and then come back and say, surprise, Steve, we finished?
No.
All right. External references, we've seen this before as well. In terms of fields, new fields relative to vulnerabilities, impact analysis. Again, current state of the occurrence of the vulnerability, justification, the rationale why the impact analysis state was asserted, and response array of any responses. So things I've often want my teams to use live in analysis, and maybe we'll get there someday. And then we also have detailed description of the impact. First issued, last updated, so we can at least cap currency. So this is actually an interesting point. I'm having a lot of discussions about it. Pardon my aside, but instead of dryly going through the spec, maybe this will add some flavor and conversation. So nothing confuses people more in my company than vulnerability information in a bill of materials. And to my last comment, this information, again, we have VDR bombs as well. So the vulnerable information can be separated out and put into a VDR bomb. And we can use bomb link to reference back to the bill of materials. So vulnerable information, I'll just, since I happen to be asked to do this, I'll point that out. And it goes about to life cycle. So it occurred to me that seeing these timestamps at this point in the schema, that's why these things exist, is that if we're producing vulnerability assessments live from a PCERT team in a company or otherwise, a lot of these information changes hourly or whatever. So it gives us a way to programmatically use CycloneDX to maintain this information and reference it to the bomb for the component that's being surveyed or being analyzed for this vulnerability. And so that's why a lot of these date fields and stuff exist at this level. So that's my side flavor commentary, which I was glad to provide.
I just added a note to the notes that timestamp in that text, I think it was 14.2.99, needs to have an RC reference.
Thank you. Yeah, what's interesting though is like if we take to heart or whatever Steve decides to do, if we do put a lot of the, like I've structured my code this way, if we take a lot of these repeated elements and put them in a separate section and link them in some way, then instead of going through every place where it appears and adding the RFC,
we can possibly just have a definition of timestamp in one place and say every time we say timestamp, it's this.
Exactly. And then looking at the field specifically, again, enumeration for analysis state resolved through not affected. And again, in triage. So I love that word because triage is actually a role that I play for an AI project. So It causes me nightmares. Justification. Lots of the justification here must be one of enumerated values. Jan, are these
may I
based
interrupt, please?
are these values based upon a reference set as well?
Nah, they're just made up.
Gotcha. Did you have another comment, Jan? You were starting to speak up.
I've seen lots of note taking where they reference these section numbers, and if you remember back to one of our first meetings, we discussed that we don't want to use our section numbers because they are not final and they will change from time to time. As we found out today, we have new section numbers which are just nested to a 3, depth of 3.
I'm just using that for, for the notes, I'm just using it for reference.
Yeah, I think it's fine as the notes, if the notes are taken as being a parallel artifact to the actual video recording, it's like it does provide a reference, but you're noting that clearly very important.
Yeah, I mean, we should just write vulnerabilities / analysis / state or something where we would actually use the location instead of that. I mean, I just looked up the old documents that we used 3 weeks ago where we had a depth of 5 digits or numbers in the section numbers, which was great. But it could be confusing if Steve generates a new document and he can't find anything that we have in notes. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yay. I'll even highlight it. How about that?
Whoa.
All right. So again, here we're back to the impact analysis justification values. I won't go through each one, obviously.
But there seems to be some binary values that are not defined as Boolean. Protected by compiler, is that a yes or no? Set, unset. There was something above as well. Requires dependency. I don't know.
Yeah, I think
it's
that
an enumeration. Sorry, yeah, it's set or unset.
Yeah, so if there's lack of clarity based upon a use case you have in your head, Ollie, if you could represent that use case.
I think that if you scroll up, there was something I was thinking. Then we went on a different tangent in discussion here. Exploitable, but that's enumeration. Sorry, me wrong. Go ahead. Ignore me.
Okay. All right. Then it's response array. The response to the vulnerability by the manufacturer, supplier, or products responsible for the affected component or service. And again, we have enumeration of cannot fix, will not fix, update to a different revision or release, rollback, workaround available. And then, of course, you have the corresponding detail, which is so important. And we have the dates that we mentioned before. We have the array of effects and describes the components of service that are affected by the vulnerability. Again, we have the reference to a component of service for the object's bomb ref. Why is the type undefined here? That seems odd to me.
I think this is one of our to-dos we have. Wait a second. Effects.
It should be bomb ref, which eventually maps to a string.
Yeah, it looks like one of the situations where the undefined is a mistake.
Let's make note of it just to be exhaustive. If somebody could help. Again, we have the ref and we have the versions that are affected. Version range of a specified in a package URL, version range syntax. status, the vulnerability status for the version or range of versions. So I can get very specific to what's been affected. Examples here for the version field. Examples here for the version range, which I love to see as a programmer.
Mm-hmm.
The status. And here's one of affected, unaffected, or unknown. Then we have our ubiquitous properties for us to use URNs and values to describe properties for different domains. So I actually had a very long conversation about this in IBM yesterday because we're adding more and more of IBM properties, which is a registered property schema prefix. So yeah, very important.
Okay, question.
Yes.
More to, I mean, we're referring there to a CycloneDX property taxonomy. Will
Yeah.
that be included in Ecma, or is that an external reference as well?
That is a great question to ask. That's a great question to ask.
I think I can answer that. 3 weeks ago we discussed it, and there's a long section in the video back then. So you could just look that. The short answer
Okay,
is
thank you.
it stays like it is. We have it as an external reference. No, it's a registry. It's not reference. It's not a specification. It's just a thing where you could go and make your things known. So in
Okay.
the end, there's no mandatory formulation or format on it. It's just the value is still a string, and you could.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I've seen lots of stuff in these fields, and I'm just trying to make sure IBM does the proper thing and uses the property taxonomy. Anyway.
So it does not have an external reference. It's just a registry is what you said?
Yeah, it's a registry, which makes sense. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So it's not specification, as Jan said, right? It's not a specification, and it looks like we don't, it sounds like based upon that context, we don't intend to make it part of a specification because it's dynamic.
Okay.
Is that correct? Is that a correct interpretation, Jan?
Yep.
Okay, I tried to capture that in the notes.
Thank you. Again, name value. So why did for the dozen other times where properties occurred, why am I hosting and we have a question on it? Is that just my style? I'm not as intimidating as Steve. I don't know.
I mean, you see different things, different meetings.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'll take that. I'll take that. All right, annotations. Comments made by people, organizations, or tools about any object with a bomb ref. So again, if we look at the fields of the annotation object, we have the bomb ref again, which I love to see. I love it and hate it. I love it more than I hate it. Subjects. What are the subjects of this annotation? Again, array bomb ref. Annotator array, organization, person, component, or service, which created the context for the annotation. So who added this information? Timestamp, when was the annotation created? Text, the actual text of the annotation, and signature. So these can be signed annotations. And these are the details of the fields to go through. Subject, again, we talked about being a bomb ref. The annotator being this object, which is an organization, individual. Again, these are repeated objects that we've seen. We'll see them expanded again. They're organizational entities, organizational contacts, excuse me. And then we have optional component for the tool that created the annotation. If it was an automated system or service. So again, if you remember the tools, new object, this follows suit with that. We can actually identify the tool or service that specifically was used to annotate. Very cool. And then now we're going into the repeated fields of organizational entity, name, address, your old contract. Again, exhaustively, those fields, once again. Yeah, the spec will probably shrink by 60% if we
Yeah.
use a referential mechanism. Yeah. Again, we just saw the address and all their fields. Lovely Austin, Texas. I actually live in Pflugerville, but I put Austin because people know it better than Pflugerville. And then we have the contact, the same repeated fields, BOMREF, name of contact, email and phone. Same commentary here for these specific fields. Same thing here. Name, where you can see a lot of repetition, email, phone. And now to the fields I just highlighted. For this one, we can identify the component or service for the tool that created the annotation, timestamp of the annotation, the actual text annotation, and its signature. And it looks like a reference to JS format. We reference the RFC that Ollie's going to make sure if there's not a new version. But I think that regardless, I think that the version here is valid unless it's been invalidated in some reason. So this should still be a valid reference for this iteration, this version of the spec. Right, signature chain. These fields are repeated as well. We've seen these fields before. Signature field. One of can represent one of the two JSF formats.
Would benefit to have I mean, this is hard for people to understand, certificate path and that kind of stuff. So it would be beneficial to have some examples there.
Yeah, I think that signature, examples for signature. And again, signature is one of the first fields I would want to make in a common section because it appears so often. Yeah. So again, I'm not going to belabor the fields, but stop me if anybody has a new thought.
Are you suggesting that there should be examples here, or there are further down?
There should be examples. Exactly.
So a note in the documentation should be to provide examples.
Yeah, I will note here, given the space, the mental space Alyssa provided by her question, is that we have an RFC here that's not a link. So I don't know.
Yeah.
We have
maybe that's a good point, Alyssa. Maybe we should put that in the authorized guide to SBOMs or something, but we need it somewhere. I mean, short examples like Austin, Texas, I think that's fine, but this probably requires a more educational material.
I think that, my opinion is if we reference, if you're going to use this field and you know enough to use the field, if we give them a link or actual reference to these RFCs that are referenced here, they should have examples. So I don't think we should represent example for somebody else's domain necessarily, unless especially if it's, we can provide a single example of what the value may look like, but exhaustively provide an example. It should be left to the domain that actually owns the specification or RFC.
Yeah, but the RFC 5280 reference and certificate path have no JSON specification in it. I read that daily, so there has to be some example on how we include an array of certificates as an example. Do we support PEM encoding? Do we support base 64 DIR encoded certificates? What do we do here? There's tons of questions.
Okay. I'll assume that you're adding stuff to notes to park them. For Steve, I don't know if Jan has any commentary because I've only viewed certificates. I've not tried to insert them myself. So my assumption is that this is trying just to provide references or pointers to, having path in the name.
Yeah, but I don't think that's good enough for the standard. But from the notes, we should probably open a ticket on that and see if we can hash out a discussion in a ticket.
Fine, that of course is fine by me.
I think
think-
I've captured that in the documentation, but you should, I mean,
Yeah,
the
I'll just-
notes.
I'll just say,
Review.
I don't think it invalidates what's in the spec. It just basically requires 4 examples.
We could sort that out with an implementation guideline or something, but I think there may be things we can improve in a future spec. So we'll see.
All right, I'm going to go through the fields. So algorithm, key ID, public key optional, key type. They're examples for key type indicator. Certificate path, let's see what's here. Let's slow down here. Nothing, this was repeated, was there.
Yeah, but it's the X509 or C5280 certificates can be encoded in multiple ways. So we need to have clearer text there. I'll see what I can do.
So yeah, so I think we have 3 minutes left. I won't I won't belabor this with my question if we're going to take this offline to discuss it, as long as it doesn't invalidate stuff. But I think this might be a good place to end up once we finish this structure, and then close out for today. So let me go. So again, trying to finish up this structure, chain, and signature. Again, you see lots of repetition, which we've discussed and addressed already. Repetition, repetition, repetition. And are we past the repetitions? And do we hit, where's new ground, key ID, public key, same thing. Yeah, lots of repetition, especially in this section. Oh my God.
Oh, we're making significant
now,
progress.
This is where now I may end up leading this one regardless, because I authored this, and people can throw darts at me all they want. So
Sorry, there was a lot of repetition in which section you were going?
Yeah, so this whole, and yeah, basically it's just right after another, for some reason, all the signature fields were repeated twice over, and I'm not sure why.
So that's
you have
another
excluded and included for some reason, and
yeah. So basically, yeah.
I think there is a valid reason, but it's very confusing when you read it.
I'm confused, but always on the right track is that there are nested objects that also are signed. So then we see the signature fields exhaustively repeated one after the other. I feel that I would love to see a referential version of the spec.
Yes.
Anyway. But if Steve gets mad at that, don't tell him to delete that part of the recording, or don't listen to it. All right, so we're at 1 minute left. How do we close out, Samina and Daniel?
Daniel's on the call. So thank you very much for going through it. There were a number of questions, and Alyssa, thank you very much. You've noted them on the minutes, which should be looked at and ensured that we haven't gone off track. And Steve should come to an alignment. I know we'll have a separate meeting, Oli, Steve, and I, regarding TG1. I can remind Steve on this. We'll continue with the review with Steve on next Thursday, and some of the issues that we brought up today should be reminded. So we will review the minutes of today's meeting next meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we may want to open some tickets in the CycloneDX repository for some of these, but we can bring that up to next meeting.
Yes, it's important that everybody on the committee here. So it'd be good to do that quick review. There are a few people that were not on the call today, but I think their organization's all represented. So I think it would be good when we start our meeting next week, just to do a short review and touch on some of this.
Okay.
Don't disagree.
Very good. Thank you so much for running that, Matt. It was excellent.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
Yes. And we're just 1 minute past the hour, so we all can go to our next meeting. Thank you. I will stop the recording.
Bye all, and Thanks for your patience today.
No worries. And there won't be any next